hey guys, how are we all? Hope you're all doing well and looking forward to the day, whatever day it is for you. I was about to say the weekend because I'm recording this on Friday, the 10th of April 2026, and it's the weekend, so weekend vibes. I wanted to do a little bit of a video talking about myself and where I grew up. So I do have a pretty, I would say, thick Australian accent, but I actually grew up in South Africa. So I am originally from South Africa. My family all South African, so I was raised South African, and that's quite an interesting story to tell people. I just want to preface and say that there is so much to dive into when it comes to talking about South Africa. I am keeping this, I think, focused on my specific story instead of South Africa's story. If anyone is interested in hearing more just about South Africa, I would love to do a video, so let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in, and then I can dive deeper into those types of topics, because South Africa has a very complex history. Hasn't always been the best country. I still can't even really say that it is, but there's still some pride about being South African, and I'm hoping to share just a little bit of that story, I guess of my story, with you guys today. So, just quickly, because I'm just going to be kind of talking, and I don't have any gum around to create some tingles and triggers, I do just have these types of little trigger items. These are just some wooden bowls that I like the sound. But yeah, so I'm probably just going to fidget with these things and talk. I do have a bit of a note up on my screen, kind of helping me just keep it on topic with the structure of what I want to talk about, because like I said, South Africa is so complex and there's so much history there, good and bad, that I've tried to make this video before, and every single time I get into it I just get lost in the nuances and all the nitty-gritty specifics of South Africa. So once again, gonna try and keep it solely on me while still telling you a little bit about my home country. So we'll start off with some quick facts, I guess. So South Africa is known as the Republic of South Africa. It is it's located at the most southern tip of Africa. It actually has 4 bordering countries. I believe it's Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Swaziland, which I believe has a different name now, but I actually don't know what the name is now. So Swaziland used to be it. So those are the neighbouring countries, and then there's actually a sovereign country inside South Africa called Lesotho. So Lesotho is not, I guess, governed by the South African government, which is quite interesting. Lesotho is one of the most beautiful places in South Africa, though, I would say, so definitely worth a visit if you ever find yourself in South Africa. So I will just again apologise, it's during the day, so there's going to be cars driving by. Hopefully it adds to the ambiance. languages that are spoken in South Africa. Four of the most common are English, Afrikaans, Zulu, and Xhosa. I believe there were 11, but I did look it up before making this video, and South African Sign Language has been added to the list of official languages. So that's why I'm saying 12 and not 11, but if we're including if we're only including verbal language, then it would be 11, but including non-verbal communication, South African Sign Language is now a thing. Well, now recognised officially. It was a thing before. Okay, so something else. It is worth noting that South Africa is known as the Rainbow Nation, purely just because of its many different and diverse cultures. Now, I wish we could all embrace those diverse cultures a lot more, but like I said, that's a different video. But yeah, so that's just a little bit about South Africa, like its basics. Our currency is rand, which is not a very strong currency in comparison to like first world countries, so Australia, UK, Europe, any of the European countries. Well, I guess the wealthier European countries, and America and stuff like that. Like, it's got a pretty poor conversion rate, but it means that you can go there and live pretty luxuriously, or go on vacation for not a lot of money. But in saying that, I think it's actually pretty expensive to go and travel there, when in terms of like accommodation, flights. But it's just like the food and the basic things are pretty cheap. Like, the conversion rate when I last looked it up, I think was like 14 rand to an Australian dollar. So for every $100 I have, I will have 1,400 rand in South Africa, I think. So it's just it's a bit of a poor country, and that just means that our rand is not very strong. Okay, so I moved here when I was, sorry, I'm trying to think. I consider myself more Australian than South African at this point, because I've been in Australia longer than I lived in South Africa. But we immigrated from South Africa to Australia in 2009, and I was 13. Put these down. I guess we're just gonna throw them. Okay, so I immigrated with my family of 4, including me. So it was my mum, my dad, my younger sister, and I, who moved to Australia in 2009. We were lucky enough to be able to come to Australia because my mum is a nurse, and at the time Australia was desperate for nurses. They had a pretty severe shortage, which I would say they still do. But the government has itself to blame for that one now. Back in 2009, or earlier, I'm not too sure. But so back in, I think it was like 2006, even 2007, a recruiter from a hospital here in Australia went over to South Africa and went to the hospitals and basically started recruiting people. And my mum was put up, basically recommended, because at the time she was running a rehab centre at a hospital. This rehab was more for physical rehabilitation, so after traumatic accidents, acquired brain injuries, stuff like that, where your body needed a lot of physical therapy. This was that kind of rehabilitation. It wasn't necessarily like a drug and alcohol kind of detox rehab. But anyway, so she got poached basically from process of immigrating to Australia started, it did take around 2 to 3 years for us to get all of our things in order. The sponsorship documents and everything kind of needed to be approved and processed before we could even start doing our logistical things. And at this time I was very young, so I didn't have much to do with the logistical side of things. I just kind of had to show up and not be an arsehole about it. And I say that because when we were told, like when my parents told my sister and I that we were moving, I was obviously quite upset. I thought they were ruining my life because I was not going to be near the friends that I had made and spent the last 12 to 13 years, building. And yeah, I really did think it was the end of my world. Obviously hindsight is a beautiful thing, and now that I'm here, almost 16 years on, I'm very grateful for the sacrifices my parents made to be here. But yeah, at 12 and 13, it seemed like my world was ending. So we basically got through that process. We got everything packed up. My parents sold their home, and my mum actually flew over to Australia, or flew here to Australia first, because this was moving to a new country with absolutely no, no foundation to kind of lean on. My mum didn't want us to all come and all be, destabilised, so she took one for the team, the absolute angel that she is, and she came over here 5 weeks before we flew to Australia, and she got everything set up for us. She found us a rental, she moved into the rental, she started her job at the hospital, she got all the furniture and she set up the home for us. And that was I can imagine it would have been really hard for her with absolutely no support system, and then leaving your kids behind and your partner, and now you have to navigate a completely new culture and a new society, really. Obviously we were lucky enough to be in an English speaking country, so it's not like there was that kind of destabilization of not knowing the language and struggling with that, but it's still a culture shock and something that you need to process. So after the 5 weeks of my mum setting everything up, my sister, dad and I flew from Durban, which is where we lived in South Africa. We flew to Johannesburg, and then we flew from Joburg to Sydney, I believe. Actually, you know what? I think it was straight to Perth. I can't remember doing a Sydney layover. Yeah, I think we came straight from Joburg to Perth. And that was probably one of the best days of my life, because I got to see my mum again. And, I have a very, very strong, solid relationship with my mum, and I don't want to sound my mama's boy or anything, but I definitely cherish that relationship with her, and I would do a lot for her. And 5 weeks at 13 years old is a long time to go without what I would say was my main parental support at the time. My dad worked a lot. He was a cop in South Africa, and he worked in a lot of the different special forces type of things in South Africa. So he moved from being a cop and a police officer and a canine handler to doing I can't remember the word his actual title, but basically he would go and track hijacked vehicles. So he would go in helicopters and just go and track places that had been marked as, these cars and these things were here. So yeah, he had a pretty hectic job, pretty dangerous job. That was actually one of the motivators as to why my parents decided to immigrate, because it just wasn't very safe for my sister and I to grow up in South Africa. say is statistically quite high. Just for an example, when I was in school, there were 3 or 4 strikes that happened where, the public school teachers were not happy with their treatment and the pay that they were receiving, which fair enough, like, I think people should be paid what they're worth, especially when it comes to teachers, but they were unhappy, like the teachers that were on strike were unhappy with some of the other teachers that didn't want to go on strike, because they, I guess, were either afraid of losing their job or afraid of some sort of consequence. And these teachers that were on strike a couple of times came to the schools that hadn't shut down, and they would start being quite aggressive and violent, which isn't really good for the safety of anybody. But I swear to God, I'm not even being dramatic, where it was like our school would have to get shut down and like locked in, and they would be throwing like Molotov cocktails and like homemade explosives and weaponry like that into the school to try and cause damage. So that was, not a super fun way to grow up. If I have to like look back at my childhood there, it wasn't not the best in terms of like my parents didn't do enough. They were wonderful, but in terms of like I was never able to just go down to the shop with friends or catch a bus by myself or do anything that I guess everyone else around me always seemed to talk about and do like adults. So yeah, it wasn't very safe. There were a lot of break-ins. I remember our next door neighbour had a pretty horrendous break-in, which I won't go into detail, but it was pretty traumatic for everybody involved. But yeah, so South Africa, not a super safe place. It's beautiful, and there is so much positive culture and different things for it to offer the world though, but the crime really does let it down a lot. But anyway, so we moved to South Africa. Sorry, I've already lost track. Silly me. Right. We moved from South Africa to Australia 2009. I think it was about, we like moved over right during the school holidays. So when I left South Africa, I was in year 7, or grade 7 is what they call it in South Africa. And because of the age differences in the schooling system, when I came to Australia, I was put in the middle of year 8. So I left school halfway through the year 7 and then re-entered halfway through year 8. So I kind of, in theory, lost about a year worth of, or missed, I guess, I missed a year worth of school and content. So that wasn't super good. I definitely struggled to kind of bounce back from that. But the school was pretty good and really accommodating with different needs and different student learning styles. So that was really wonderful, and I did actually eventually end up getting a lot of really good support and ended up doing wonderfully at school. But yeah, the first year was a real shit show of me trying to find my feet. But I'm very grateful for the school teachers and everything. They were wonderful. So growing up in Australia from my teenage years, I guess, was pretty fun because I kind of just got to do all the things that I guess I was missing, or not even missing, but jealous of, I guess, in South Africa. I got to ride my bike to parks, and I got to go to shopping centres with friends. Yeah, like it was fun and different, but also very sad because I'm quite family oriented, and we obviously left all of our family behind. And I specifically really miss my grandparents and my auntie and my uncle. remember of going to someone's house to really not doing any of that and just kind of hanging out with mum, dad, and my younger sister. So that can be quite a change, quite a shift in your routine and what you're used to and what you enjoy. But we were very lucky to be able to sponsor my grandparents, so my mum's mum and dad, to come over to Australia and live here. So I believe like 3 or 4 years after we immigrated, they moved here too, and that was amazing. That was really a bit of a turning point, I guess, in my mental health as well, because my grandparents have always been, I would say, pretty stable role models for me. So yeah, it was really awesome to have them kind of back in my life on a more regular basis, and to not have that pesky like 6-hour time difference. I think it's 6 hours. Yeah, 6 or 8. I'm not actually 100% sure about that anymore. Okay, but so I'm trying to think of like, I remember life in South Africa being pretty hectic at some point. Like there was a lot of load shedding, so where the electricity would go out because our energy companies are not managed well, and for the life of them cannot manage and distribute electricity to every suburb. Don't ask me why. It makes me angry. But yeah, so there would be a lot of times where our power would just go out for hours and hours, sometimes even like a full day, and we would basically just be living off of like our camping stuff, but in the house. So that was pretty weird and fun. The schooling system here, in comparison to South Africa, was quite eye-opening as well. School in South Africa, the systems are very strict, regardless of if you're in a public or a private sector or school, I guess. It's always very strict. Like I remember in public school, we had to polish our shoes every morning. We had to make sure our shorts were not past a certain, like our knees. We had to wear ties, and if clothes weren't presented neatly, like you actually got sent home or you got sent to detention. So if one sleeve wasn't ironed properly, I remember getting detention for that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a lot more strict, I guess, in South Africa. They also had like, I don't know, is it called corporal punishment? I don't think it is, but they would like physically punish kids in South Africa. I used to get hit in the knuckles, so right there, with a metal ruler when they were trying to teach us to write. So we would be pretty young, we were like 6 or 7, and like write with a pen. They would make me like try and sit on my left hand because I was left-handed, and they didn't like that. So when I struggled to do that, the next punishment was a good old ruler to the knuckles, which also didn't work because I'm still left-handed. The fools. But yeah, like I remember being bent over desks and like caned, like had a full long cane, and I would just be belted with it. So yeah, it was really nice coming here to Australia, and like teachers couldn't even yell at you in a certain way without them being like pulled in and told off. And obviously there's a whole different kind of story to go into there with teachers nowadays and back in the day, because I think teachers nowadays are struggling, and I think that could be definitely explored a lot, because it is hard. It's really hard for teachers. But yeah, it was a really cool realization for me coming from South Africa to Australia, knowing that I was never going to be beaten again in the name of punishment at school. single school, public or private, had huge religious undertones and focuses. Whereas here in Australia, there really isn't that unless it's a private school. And unless the private school is privately run by a religious organisation. So yeah, it's interesting. I think like in detention in South Africa, I used to have to write out verses from the Bible. Just pages and pages and pages of it. And that was my detention. And then detention here in Australia, you just had to sit in a classroom and be quiet. Like that was it. So yeah, it was interesting and different. Culturally, I think there wasn't much of a difference. I think Australian and South African people, or some South African people, can be very, very relaxed, very, yeah, I guess laid back. And that is a lot of Australians. So yeah, I think in terms of like fitting in culturally with society, it wasn't super hard or anything. I feel like we assimilated pretty good. Or I should say pretty well. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of anything else. I think there's probably a lot more to go into, especially about like growing up in South Africa, because it was pretty crazy. This is definitely a story I won't go into too much now, but I remember once like a gun went off in our oven, because South Africa at the time, I don't know, was just not safe, and I think our house was a bit of a target because my dad was a cop at the time, and people that didn't like him very much knew where he lived, so he would hide his gun in unsuspecting places, but then also not tell my mother. So one time, I think I said I wasn't going to tell you the story, and now I'm just telling you the story, but one time he put his black gun at the bottom of our oven, which was also black, so you really couldn't see it just from like a quick glance. And he didn't tell my mum, and my mum didn't see it, and she put a lasagna in the oven for dinner, and maybe 20 minutes later, Mum and I were hanging out at the kitchen table. Dad wasn't home at the time, and we both just heard gunshots. So she freaked out, pulled me to the floor, and we just heard gunshot after gunshot after gunshot until my dad's mag was empty in that gun. Sorry, I had to go and get Bandit because he was being a menace. But anyway, so yeah, so the gun went off, the mag was emptied, and Mum was just freaking out. And I remember being pretty like, what's going on? Like just very laughy about it. Obviously that's just fight or flight, and my body's nervous system reacting with laughter. But I have like such a vivid memory of my dad showing up to the house like midway through this gun going off, and my mum is just yelling at him because where we were laying down, the front door was like directly down the hall. So Dad's just at the front like, what's going on? And Mum is just laying into him like why have you done this? Like that's so stupid. What have you done? And realistically it was really stupid. I blame so many systems for giving an idiot 20-year-old or 21-year-old or some shit a gun. So again, I think he wasn't 21 at the time. I think they were 21 when they had me. And I was probably around 4 or 5 at the time. So 25, 26. experience, and definitely one that I tend to tell from time to time. But I remember there were always like a lot of guns around the house, like locked up and stuff, but because my dad was a police officer, there was just plenty of weapons. I forgot to mention that in South Africa we had a dog named Stretch, and he was a cute little sausage dog. And he was unable to come with us when we immigrated because he was too old at the time. And the vet said that he would most likely not last and make the trip over because pets have to be put in quarantine for so long. So I think it would have been like 8 to 12 weeks of our little Stretchy in a small cage, basically being quarantined. And as a sausage dog, he's already not in the best health just because of their, their kind of issues genetically. But yeah, that was a hard one to let go of, our little Stretch. But luckily enough, he just got to live with our grandparents for the rest of his lovely little life, and that was wonderful because it meant we still got all the updates. And we still got to see him grow old, and he got so fat. Our grandparents were so bad with the treats, man. He got so fat. They eventually got better when the vet told them off, and they were like, okay, fine, we'll put him on a diet. But still, such a chunky boy at one point. So, high school in Australia was good. University in Australia was really good. I actually ended up having a little bit of a rough life in terms of just not making the best decisions at certain points, and I would say about 80% through my university degree, I unfortunately got a criminal record, which meant that I could no longer, actually actively get a career in the degree I was studying, which was psychology. It was social and developmental psychology. So, due to that, it's been a bit of like a pivot in what I've done, but I'm still in mental health and crisis support, but just not in a clinical sense, which I've actually ended up liking more. So yeah, so that's interesting the way life works out, but I'm very grateful to be where I am, and I think I've learned a lot from my mistakes and my achievements and everything in between. So I just try to kind of navigate with the same, I guess, gratitude and curiosity going forward. I'm definitely not perfect. No humans are. And I would never expect any humans to be perfect. I think it's just about always trying to be better than you were the last day. Or the day before, I guess. So, I'm 30 this year, which would come up to almost 16 years in Australia. Which is wild to think about. It's wild to think that this is now my home, and since I've been here, I've actually not been back to South Africa, which is a little bit, I know there's complicated feelings there about that one. I want to go home and visit the rest of the family, but I also don't know if it would be worth it. But yeah, stay tuned for that one. I'll probably go back, but it's just not high on the list. I forgot to even mention, because I don't really have a lot of South African memorabilia and things around the house, so I did decide to wear the only kind of South African thing I have, which is our Springboks rugby jersey. Now this is a pretty old jersey. This is a jersey from like, I think maybe 2011 or so. It was actually my dad's, and he gave it to me when racism and segregation. That's definitely stuff I'm not proud of. But yeah, alright. Thanks for watching, guys. And I hope you guys have a lovely morning, day, afternoon, night, whenever you're watching this. Take care of yourselves. And look after one another. One another. And I will see you in the next video.